I'm here to tell you guys about the best shaving products I've ever used. They're over at oldpostroadoils.com. These guys sent me the shaving soap for men and the aftershave oil for men. Both are incredible. I have to say, the aftershave oil for men blew me away. It smells amazing, which is important, but there's no chemicals. It's all natural, and it's actually really good for your skin. It's not one of these things that burns or dries your face out. And let's face it, I'm 45 years old. It's time to make sure I'm taking care of my face so I don't look like an old man in a few years. But women, they've got stuff for you too. They've got rejuvenating oil for women and specialty soap for women. And I know a lot of you guys have beards. They've got the Old Post Road beard oil for men. So check this stuff out. It's really good. They've got hand and body wash and things like that too. I'm telling you, this aftershave oil for men is the best I've ever used. I highly recommend it. And these guys are a very small company, veteran owned, and they support this show. So they're going to give you free shipping when you enter promo code BUCK at checkout. That is BUCK, B-U-C-K, at checkout over at oldpostroadoils.com. Go check them out. Let's get to the show.
You are now listening to the Counterflow Podcast, a place for dissonant voices and unapproved opinions.
You get split in fucking half, cause I call the hologram graph, but I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus, but I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Here is your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back once again to the Counterflow Podcast. This is episode number 200. Can you believe it? 200 episodes. Here we are. Well, there's been more than 200 because I've dropped some bonus episodes here and there, which, by the way, there's a bonus episode coming out soon, so keep an eye out for that. But whatever the case is, as actual numbering of the shows go, this is episode 200. I've got a really good guest here to celebrate this momentous occasion. It's Charlie Robinson. I know a lot of you guys are familiar with him. I've had multiple people throughout the months and years reach out to me and ask me to get Mr. Charlie Robinson on the show. So I did. And we're going to talk about some things that sound a bit scary, but this is not a black-pilled, scary, pessimistic episode. We're discussing the things, and then we're discussing how to get around the things and get through the things and so on, all of that kind of thing. We're talking about the digital pandemic that could be coming our way. Why do we say that? Well, you'll find out in this episode, but let's put it this way. There's some rich, powerful, influential people that are talking about it. And no, that's not Charlie Robinson and myself. We are discussing those people that have talked about it and when they've been right in the past, unfortunately. So the digital pandemic that could be coming our way, we're talking about your ESG score. Do you know what that is? Well, you will find out, kind of like a social credit score coming our way. We will be discussing all of this stuff. Charlie's very good at picking apart propaganda, and he's much better than a lot of people. I've seen people that saw right through much of the COVID propaganda over the last few years, all of a sudden bite right back onto the mainstream narrative propaganda coming out about Russia and Ukraine like they never learned a lesson at all. So we're going to talk about some of that as well. Let me just tell you about Charlie Robinson. For those of you who don't know, he's the author. This is such a great title for a book. He's the author of The Octopus of Global Control, a controversial and humorous book that takes quotes from over 500 witnesses to some of history's greatest events and uses them to piece together and expose a century-long plan for world domination. He is also the co-author of the #1 best-selling book, The Controlled Demolition of the American Empire, written with Jeff Berwick from The Dollar Vigilante. That's available on Amazon also. Great name for that book too, The Controlled Demolition of the American Empire. When he's not writing the books, you might know him from being the host of the Macroaggressions podcast, which can be found everywhere podcasts are found, like this one. So, without further ado, from the Macroaggressions podcast, Charlie Robinson, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Thanks for being.
I'm excited. Let's get weird. There's so much to talk about. It's almost impossible to know where to start, really.
I know, you're right. And it's funny, I'm sure you're familiar with this thing. If depending on when you record and then how many days it is till the episode drops, that it's like, oh my God, I hope too much doesn't happen between the recording time or.
I know. You're like, I don't want us to ever go to war, but I especially don't want us to go to war in between episodes because that would look weird.
Right. Yeah. And especially if you're predicting something that in the complete opposite happens before the episode comes out,
Right. Yeah. I did that with the Ghislaine Maxwell thing. I'm like, she's got to be, they're going to let her out. I just know they're going to let her out. And then she was found guilty. And I was like, I stand corrected. That's fine. It's fine. Actually, I've never wanted to be wrong about something so much in my life than the outcome of the Maxwell verdict. But so I'm glad she's still in that jail cell. But we'll see how long that lasts.
Well, this is your first time on this show, so for my listeners that don't know about you, go ahead and really tell them anything you'd like to about the show, your books, really whatever you'd like, what you do.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. I always appreciate the opportunity to talk to people about what I see out there. I fully recognize that I'm only one set of eyeballs, and I know everybody else has got a different opinion and they've got a different vantage point on these things. But I got into this accidentally, like a lot of people. I was working in real estate in Las Vegas during the boom and bust of 2003 to 2012, and I saw things that I never thought I would see. And that movie and book, The Big Short, where they're talking about, where Michael Lewis does the comparison of, talks about how they were, about the housing market. And in that movie, they have these, they jokingly go to a Miami strip bar to ask the strippers, about what's going on in the housing market. That was real. I was living in Las Vegas, and that watching that movie was like a documentary to me, and the things that were happening and that insanity. And so it woke me up to, I had already had a kind of an understanding about 9/11 before that. But in 2007, a friend of mine gave me John Perkins' book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman. And that just changed my life. It allowed me to see things on a much bigger scale, like the global shenanigans that go on. And what I realized was that some of the tactics they were using on the global level with the World Bank and the IMF, how they were enslaving these third world countries that didn't know better than to take money from these madmen. What they were doing on a big scale, we were doing in Las Vegas on a smaller scale, loaning money to people that had no business borrowing money to buy houses that they couldn't afford, that we knew they were going to default on at some point, and I didn't understand the game. And so after reading that book, and this was 2007, there was the tail end of the hot market. I went, oh no, this is bad. And now I understand what's going on. And so that led me down a path where, like a lot of people in the housing bust, I got hurt on it too. And I was selling homes to people. I was working for a builder, so I was selling new homes to people. So it's still real estate, but it's a little different than traditional real estate. But I was selling homes to these really nice people that were all living in this community, and the value was up high when I sold it, and then it just dropped, 50% in some cases. And I watched a lot of people get hurt, myself included, and I vowed to not ever be a sucker again. I knew they were playing 3-card money. I just wanted to understand how I knew it was rigged. I just wanted to understand how it worked. And so that led me down this path of trying to figure out how money works. And I was finding out about the dollar and the Federal Reserve and all of these things. And it led me down, just interesting rabbit holes. And I got to a point where it just a normal day, I think it was 2015 or so, my mom had stopped by and I was telling her, about some great new conspiracy I'd just come across or something like that. And I was very enthusiastic about it. And she said, look, this is really interesting. You found all these topics and all these lies and all these scams out there. And it's really interesting, but what are you going to do? Like, what's the point? What are you going to do about it? And I honestly didn't have an answer. I didn't think I had a role. I didn't think I had to do anything about it. And so then I started thinking, well, what would I do? And I thought, well, maybe I could write a book about this, or, I thought, well, I could do a documentary. I thought, well, I don't really know how to do a documentary. And I said, well, I know how to write. I can write a book. So I didn't tell anybody. In total silence, I started writing this book, which turned out to be The Octopus of Global Control, my first book that came out in 2017. And I at first I didn't tell anyone I was writing it because I didn't want to, you'd tell your friends, I'm writing a book, and they go, hey man, how's that book coming? And it's like 2 years later and you're like, oh, I never finished it. I just didn't want that. And then about halfway through the book, my reasoning for keeping it secret changed from, I don't want to be held like unaccountable for this book, to, I don't want anybody to tell me to stop. That became like the new mission. And I put that book out in 2017, and I went and did a bunch of promo for it, and it was crazy. I wound up getting, I went all over the place promoting it, and I was in London. Ironically, I was doing this show called Renegade Inc., and it's a show that's filmed in London, and I was on the set with him, and I, what I said was, I love Ross's work. He's the host of Renegade Inc. Ross, I love your work. But beyond this show that he was doing, he had directed a documentary called Four Horsemen. And it was one of these documentaries that really opened my eyes to the financial component to it. And the main character, like the main person he interviewed, was John Perkins, the author of Confessions of an Economic Hitman. So I had this connection with him. When I got done with our interview and we were just talking off air, Ross said to me, Perkins wrote his book in total secrecy as well. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that. In his case, I think it's because people probably wanted to murder him for writing it. In my case, it was much different but still, I was like, okay, I felt like I was in good company. So that's how I started. It wasn't like some mission to really like save the world or anything like that. I was tired of being the guy who couldn't understand that the carnival games were rigged. And I knew I just wanted to understand how it worked. I was never going to play those games anymore, but I just wanted to understand the mechanics behind it. So that started me down this path. And now I've got Macroaggressions, a podcast. I've got the Union of the Unwanted, which is a group podcast that we do. And it's just been a long, strange trip, as Jerry Garcia once said.
And it had to have been interesting, just, I don't like this term, but for lack of a better one, this journey, because to write a little bit about quote unquote conspiracies and some older ones and some levers of power around the world and group dynamics and things like that. And then to come upon 2020, when a lot of the stuff kind of goes into overdrive, some of the things that you probably were familiar with already. And then it's really the last couple of years were like things we've never seen before. Did your recent past, writing that book and discovering what you discovered, did that kind of help you see 2020 in a different light?
It did, in one particular way that jumped out at me. And that was having an understanding of who the pharmaceutical industry was prior to 2020. And I had tackled that when looking at not just the big pharma in general, but the vaccine component of that in particular. So I was very familiar with the VAERS court, and I knew about the real questions that had been posed about the safety and efficacy of vaccines. I knew about Pfizer being paying the largest criminal fine in the history of America. I knew that all of the major pharmaceutical companies were convicted felons. They'd all been found guilty in court of law of felonies and things like that. So I knew they were dirty. And I think that helped me in 2020 to recognize what was going on a little bit faster, because I didn't have that ramp up or that learning curve of, wait a second, you mean the medical industry isn't our friend?
Right.
And it's like, well, it is the number 3 leading cause of death in America. And so I knew because I knew all of that going on or going into 2020. And it's not, let me be clear, it's not to say I knew it all, but I knew who I was dealing with at least. I was instantly suspicious from the beginning of them. So I was already looking into them right away. And because I'd already been writing about them in advance of this. And I was halfway through book number 2, Controlled Demolition of the American Empire, I was more than halfway through. We were almost done with it by the time the spring of 2020 rolled around and everything changed. So at that point, I had at least an idea of who I was dealing with, at least from the industry standpoint. I didn't know who Fauci was. I must admit, I feel, and now looking back on it, I feel a little dumb for not knowing that, but I just didn't know. I didn't go down that path of HIV and AIDS, and I just hadn't gotten there yet. Maybe if I had, I would have known who he was in advance, but I was already suspicious because I understand the mouthpiece component for like the American empire. So when you get a guy like Fauci and he's out there talking, of course, I had already been kicked off of Twitter for the things I had said about Bill Gates prior to 2020. So I was no fan. And so I think that kind of helped. It like they say, everybody became an epidemiologist in 2020, so you were forced to kind of learn who to talk to and who to trust. But a lot of those guys, I already knew them from being, from going to Anarchapulco and being a speaker the last couple of years. I knew Del Bigtree and had seen these guys there, Dr. Sherry Tenpenny. So all these people that sort of came to the forefront during the COVID situation had been around for a while, and we knew who they were. I'd watched their presentations, and they were phenomenal. So yeah, if anything, really what it did was I didn't have the learning curve of going through that process of first becoming suspicious and then investigating these industries, because I'd already done that. So by the time they were spouting all of this stuff, I was suspicious right off the bat. But even then, still. Even then, when I on book number 2, I wrote it with Jeff Berwick, who is the host of The Dollar Vigilante, and we were ready. We were almost done with that book right around spring of 2020. But then when they locked everything down, we agreed, all right, let's hang on for a second. Let's hang on for a couple months on this book, and let's see where things go, because I think this is going to play into it. It's going to be important. And so we did. We sat on things until August of 2020, and then I said, I think I've seen enough. And Jeff's like, yeah, me too. So then we wound up finishing up the book right around then.
Did anything about the way the public reacted surprise you?
No, because I don't have much respect for the general public when it comes to dealing with the mainstream media. I was, I was disappointed, of course, but I wasn't surprised. I don't have a lot of respect for the people that just turn on the TV news and just swallow everything that they're told. Now, and to be clear, I was one of those people for a long time. I think we all are. As a kid, you don't know better. You turn on the TV, you just assume they're telling you the truth. But I felt like when 2020 happened, it was really it was frustrating for me, because I realized, man, not only do the vast majority of people not understand what the pharmaceutical industry is all about, but they don't understand what the media is about either. So this is going to be a real uphill battle, because once I get them to understand that big pharma is dirty, then it's like, well, I got news for you. We're gonna have to start this process all over again. And have you heard of the mainstream media? And then you lay out that whole thing, because when you've got two industries that are pathological in the way they behave, and they come together in a joint venture like what we've been living through, it's a wonder we get anything right, because they have such a stranglehold on the data coming out of the pharmaceutical industry and the messaging coming out of the news in all of its form, not just television news, but internet news and radio and print and the like. So they've got a control on that, on the flow of information, and the flow of information is filled with dirty information. So it was like it's a lot to unpack for people. So though I was disappointed with the response from the general public, I wasn't surprised by it, unfortunately. I mean, I would have been surprised if everyone had figured it out. That would have really surprised me. The fact that it took a lot of people, and still some people haven't really even started asking the questions, which is crazy to me. But I recognize that people come to this at their own speed, if they even come to it at all, and that everybody's all at a different pace. And I understand that, like, when I wasn't aware of this stuff, it must have been frustrating to try to explain it to me too. So it's this little bit of a battle where I'm trying to like, I'm trying to shake people awake, but at the same time, I have to remember, first of all, that's a bad way to do it. And second of all, not everybody's ready to be awake to this. And so it's been an education for everybody, myself included. It's been an education on how to how to deliver a message while standing in the face of everybody else out there is telling you you're wrong, and the power of the media and the power of groupthink and everything. I've been saying if it wasn't so damn serious, what we've been living through the past 2 years, it would be fascinating to just study it and watch it, because the human psychology component to it, mixed with the media, mixed with fear and big pharma and everybody's going to die and manipulated numbers. Boy, man, they did a number on people. They broke some brains out there.
Yes, they did. Some easier than others, no doubt about it. One of my favorite sponsors is back with us here on Counterflow. That would be Texas Scorecard. Anytime you want to find out anything that's going on in the Texas political scene without a bad propagandized media narrative, just visit Texas Scorecard. They were founded in 2015 by a former Ron Paul congressional press secretary. They're Texas-based, they're a Texas-focused counterculture media organization. They've got so many cool things over at Texas Scorecard. Lots of podcasts, videos. Actually, I was a part of that. You can find a video there of me being interviewed in the Texas Scorecard studio. They've got live programming. They've got a print edition. They've got a very popular daily email newsletter highlighting the biggest stories of the day. They've even got a program to help grow the next generation of disruptors, and we like that. Their mission: disrupt statism and reconstitute self-governments. They are pro-citizen. They serve the grassroots against big government through narrative, tools, and information. They do not align with any party. I think that's very important. They work to hold lawmakers on both sides of the aisle accountable. They're a nonprofit. There's no paywalls. You guys aren't going to have to pay for any of this. The reporting is always free. Find them on all social media channels by searching Texas Scorecard. They're on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all of that. You can sign up for their free daily newsletter at texasminute.com. That is texasminute.com. Think about this. They support this program for you guys. So just give them a look. Texas Scorecard. Anytime you want to find out the real deal of what's going on in the Texas political scene, Texas Scorecard is your one-stop shop. Let's get back to the show. One of the groups some of us became familiar with was the World Economic Forum.
Yeah.
And a gentleman by the name of Klaus Schwab.
Yes.
You have recently done an episode that was discussing something known as cyber polygon. Another thing that Klaus Schwab discussed, aside from COVID-19 and some of the stuff that we have seen, and it's kind of a digital pandemic rather than the viral pandemic. Just broadly, and then we can jump into the weeds on this. Explain to people that are going, cyber polygon, I've never heard of this.
Yeah.
What's an elevator pitch for kind of what we're looking at here?
So they run simulations, and lots of industries, lots of companies run simulations. Best case scenario, worst case scenario. If this happens, what are we going to do? Nothing wrong with that. Got to be prepared. The World Economic Forum in 2019, before this whole thing broke out, they ran a simulation with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and Johns Hopkins Medical Center, simulating the outbreak of a coronavirus that sweeps the globe, escapes. It escapes from a market in this case, they started it in Rio, but then they said it wound up in China, and then it spread from China everywhere. And then it sweeps the globe, shutting down travel internationally, killing 65 million people, and basically wrecking the environment or wrecking the world. That was for COVID. So they put that out. 6 months later, it kicked off. Everyone went, that's a little suspicious. You guys simulated something that had a lot of moving parts, and you got a whole lot of that simulation right. It seemed almost too accurate. And of course, you see the people that are involved. Well, they ran another simulation in the summer of 2020 called Cyber Polygon. And what Cyber Polygon did was it simulated the breakdown of the internet due to a cyber attack. And what it does in this fictional simulation that they brought in like 200 different groups to participate in. It was a major production. It took several days. It involved over 100 countries were involved in it, and they sent, delegations from their country. It was a big deal. And in this scenario, they basically role played what happens, what's the messaging that we'll use when a bad actor commits a cyber attack, and it takes down the not just the internet, but it takes down the power grid that's all controlled, and it takes down a variety, a couple of things that create mass chaos. The banking system goes down. It's hard to get messages back and forth. How do we deal with this? Now, if you and I run that simulation, I got no problem with it. We're just speculating about what may happen. When the World Economic Forum runs this simulation, after previously running a simulation, which they got real close, it makes me nervous. And it doesn't just make me nervous because I'm a paranoid tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist or anything like that. It makes me nervous because these are the same people that have run similar events going all the way back to anthrax in 2001. Johns Hopkins Medical Center was involved in that as well. And there's a pattern forming that is, they run drills simulating something awful happening, and then a couple months later, something awful happens that mimics almost exactly the scenario that they ran a simulation for. In the case of the anthrax, just to be specific on this, in the simulation in 2001, they had it simulated that Judith Miller, the journalist, would receive anthrax in the simulation. A couple months later in real life, Judith Miller gets anthrax sent to her. Of course, it was fake anthrax because she's in on it. She's a deep state participant in this. But that's the sort of things that I'm talking about. It's not, I see the similarities. It's like the similarities are so obvious that you wonder why these people aren't being dragged down to the police station and interrogated. Because if you and I had this much advanced knowledge of, let's just say, an unsolved murder, and then they solved the murder and it was exactly like the information you and I speculated about, it would be reasonable for them to ask us questions about that. But that doesn't seem to happen in any of these scenarios because the people that are involved and the people that are running it also control the media, and so that makes it a lot tougher for the message to get out. So anyway, that's why Cyber Polygon has me concerned, not because I think that the internet's going to just go out organically, or that we're going to have a sunspot or a solar flare or something like that, which could happen, of course, but I don't think those things are going to happen. It makes me nervous when the same people that keep getting these scenarios and simulations accurately predicted, when they come up with a new one, I start to go, okay, well, it's time to build a Faraday cage or something. It's time to figure out how to protect my electronics or buy some storable food or something. Because there's one thing I'm learning. It's that if you wait for the mainstream media to tell you what to do or how to act or to be prepared or be proactive, then you'll be waiting for a very long time. And so it's kind of up to us to see the signs, do the best research that we can do, and then take action and know that and trust ourselves that what we see, look, what I see is I'm going to need some storable food. Is the nightly news going to tell me that? Absolutely not. Not going to hear it from them. But I recognize the signs. I trust my gut. I trust my instincts, and I'm going to be proactive. So I've been trying to get people to be as proactive as they can, simply because they would prefer us to be reactive instead. So.
Mm-hmm. I did an episode last week with my friend Vin Armani, and one of his main messaging points was do the hard work now, so you don't have to do it when things actually get hard. And that's an age-old message, but he's applying it to where things are right now. And a friend of mine, Pete, from the Pete Quinones show, says, there are people that are saying, well, these guys are just weirdos that are a bunch of rich people sitting around at a meeting. Well, when rich, powerful people say something that they want to happen, at least I'd like to listen to what they're saying. You can take it with a grain of salt. You can be skeptical. You can be fearful. But if people at the World Economic Forum are predicting something or are saying something, they've got a lot more power than you or I. So I'm at least curious on what they're saying. So you listed a few things like the internet going down. Is this on a grand scale? Is this a state, a country? Because COVID was worldwide, and that's the first time in my lifetime we've seen something of that magnitude. Have they hinted at the magnitude of Cyber Polygon?
They said that it would do what COVID didn't do. So whatever that means, that it would be the thing that when Bill Gates says, wait till the second wave, that'll get their attention. It makes me think of something like this. I can't read his mind and I don't know exactly what he's talking about. He could be talking about another strain, another variant, another whatever bioweapon that they've got. But I'm with you, Buck. It's not to say that I'm going to necessarily believe everything that the people at the World Economic Forum say, but I do want to hear what they're saying. And I think that it's important because they, it's if you know their mentality, they're not a group of people that are like, kumbaya, let's save the world. If they were interested in doing that, they would be tackling the hunger problem. They're like, no, we've got to inject everyone with these experimental vaccines. It's like, yeah, but what about the people that are starving? Shouldn't we feed them first? They're like, as long as they get their vax. It's like, this doesn't seem like it's about their well-being. So I'm interested to know what they're saying, because I know that they have no interest in our well-being. They have interest in manipulating society and making moves that benefit them. And they, of course, have a deep, the World Economic Forum has a deep ties to the eugenics movement in Britain, and also in, just coming out of Germany. I mean, and Klaus Schwab's roots being Swiss. So there's a devious and dark component to it that underlies it all, which is very eugenics-based, depopulation. Obviously, that doesn't look good on the brochures, so they keep that part hidden. And I'm not suggesting that every company that works with the World Economic Forum is a part of this necessarily. I don't know that they all even know the ins and outs of what they're doing. I think maybe some of them do, but I do recognize that this is a dangerous group of people that are plotting and making moves well in advance, and that it behooves us to at least listen to the conversation. And it's not like tinfoil hat type stuff. I mean, to say that Event 201 was actually a thing is not speculation. They've got the video up. You can watch it on YouTube. I mean, it's available
Yes.
there. It's a real thing. It really happened. They don't deny it. It happened in New York City in October of 2019, and they simulated the outbreak of a coronavirus, and I'll be damned if it didn't happen almost exactly the way they simulated it. So it's like when you do that, when you write the 2017 SPARS pandemic document, which was written by, once again, Johns Hopkins Medical Center involved in that simulates the outbreak of a coronavirus, and then some of the things in that 80-page document wind up happening exactly the way it's written in this document, down to the fact that they had a fictional rapper that was pushing the vaccines with the hashtag on Twitter, vaccines work. You saw that in the document in 2017. You see that in 2021 with, back that vax up and the Run DMC cartoons and yo, get your vaccines on. Yeah, hashtags vaccines work. And I'm like, it's the same terminology. They're not even changing it at all. So you see enough of these things and you start to say either they're really good at predicting the future or they're making the future happen.
Mm-hmm. I come from the libertarian, right-leaning political world since about 2000-ish, maybe a little prior to that, I could say. And I'm in Texas, and as everyone knows, Texas is a big gun state. One of the things I grew up listening and hearing to and parroting that I'm trying to get people away from this day and age is wait, when they come for our guns, then they're going to be sorry. That's when things are going to get bad. And I think we've seen this certainly with the Canadian trucker thing, but even prior to that, they don't need to come for your guns. They can turn your bank account off and freeze your assets. I'm not sure that anyone like Beto O'Rourke saying, "Well, no, I'll collect them if I win this or that." It's like, yeah, you're not going to do that because that would be a violent scenario, especially in this state. They don't have to do that. They can deperson you. They can shut you down electronically. They don't have to have a physical gulag at this point. They can shut your grid off if they want to do that. Have you talked about that type of messaging, and do you see that progression maybe away from the old-fashioned, they're going to march me into a physical prison and take my stuff, into this, they can just do this with the press of a button at a bank? They did it to the Canadian truckers. Do you see that as well?
Yeah, and I've been pretty vocal about telling people to, once again, this is a lot like what you were talking about with Vin, that you've got to do the work now. Like if you're watching or listening to shows like this or mine, you're clearly into alternative information. You're interested in finding out what's really going on, not what you're told to believe. So because of that, you're going to come across information that is very different than what the mainstream is talking about. You'll hear me in my show saying, listen, keep as little money in the bank as you can, get that money out and do whatever you want with it. It might be that you do the old mattress thing. You might want to buy gold, silver, maybe crypto is what you're into. Definitely food, but just understand the relationship that you have with your bank is one that if you read the fine print, it's their money. You put your money in that bank account and it becomes their money and you're an unsecured creditor to it. And if you're in that situation and, well, let's just say that the bank manager steals the mini vault and disappears with his girlfriend to Tahiti, right? You're probably going to be fine. Like FDIC will come in, they'll make everybody whole. They've got the money to do that. They've got about 2% of all the deposits. They've got money for about 2% of that. That's fine if something happens on your local level. If you have a systemic banking collapse, are you going to be okay getting $2 on every $100 you had in there? Probably not. That is if you even get any of it, because the bondholders are in line in front of you and you're an unsecured creditor. You'll be lucky if you get anything. So I want people to, and I say that to people because it was not to scare them, though it may be scary, but just because it's an interesting piece of information that I didn't know. And once I found out about that, I said, that goes in my file of traps that I'm not going to walk into. And so, look, you're right. They don't have to come for you. They don't have to knock on your door and put you in the paddy wagon and take you down. They can they can deperson you just as easily. They can shut off your internet. They can shut off your bank access. With the emergence of a social credit system, and if we allow that to happen, they'll, based on your score, be able to allow you certain privileges and turn off other features that if you are critical of the government, if you don't pay your taxes, we're already seeing that being tied to your passports and things like that, like your actual passport. So there's a lot of things that they can do, and that don't involve them actually showing up and you getting into an armed Waco-style gun battle with these people. We don't want that to happen, but they would be stupid to try that. That like we have rightly acknowledged, America's got guns, and so if they, and the American government makes bad decisions all the time. But I've got to think that they are aware that Americans have guns and that a head-on conflict would be a bad idea. And so in the interest of not, and also bad optically for people to know that and to see images of people getting dragged out of their house and arrested for crazy things like that. So you can do it a different way, and that is to just cut people's access to the necessities in life. And that works just as well, maybe even better from their standpoint.
You mentioned something there, and it's something I wanted to ask you about. You said social credit system. I hear that term now being thrown around. It's crazy. I've used to watch a show called Black Mirror, and this was maybe 5 years ago. They had episodes with this exact thing in it. But there's something called an ESG score, and I believe it stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance Score.
Correct. Yeah.
And it's funny when you start to research this, it's so far from, I'll preface this with, I think people like you, myself, and many of my listeners are familiar with researching certain things, and you find yourself in the weirdest corners of the internet with conspiracy type things. Mm-hmm. That is not at all. When you start researching ESG scores, it's big companies just putting stuff up there on the internet like it's like a thing that everyone knows about already. And yet I don't think everyone does know about it. What do you know about that? Can you talk to that at all?
Yeah, this is a devious one because it's coming to us disguised as a way to measure how good a company is with regard to on a couple different factors. Now we've moved into this woke world that I think most people would disagree with and have no interest in participating in, and it's now infected big business as well. It's infected big business because it's going to be a big business, and the ESG component to this is that you're going to give companies a score, sort of like a Better Business Bureau rating, and you're going to take three different things into consideration: environmental, how green is this company? Are they making poisons? Or is it Monsanto? And are they, what are they doing with their toxic byproducts? Are they disposing of them correctly? Are they bad for the environment? Are they using solar? All these things. There's a bunch of factors that go into it, and so based on this criteria, they'll assign you a score for the environmental part. The social has to do with how diverse is your board of directors, and you're like, what difference does this make? Like, I'm trying to run a multi-billion-dollar company. I don't care if my board of directors is filled with people that are purple and blue. As long as they're the best people in the world, that's who I want on my board. Or maybe they're my investors or whatever. There's a variety of reasons why people are on the board of directors. Well, not anymore, because if you don't have enough transsexual black handicapped midgets on your board, you're going to get a bad ESG score because the S component is going to be severely lacking. So now they're forcing companies to make decisions about their company based on social justice criteria. Not a good idea. And the third is governance, and that has to do also with the board. But it's like, well, how are you running this company? Are you promoting the right people? Are you promoting any women? Oh, you're not promoting any women. You're like, well, but I don't have any women in my. Oh, it doesn't matter, And so they're creating a score based on this criteria, which is going to be subjective and very, hard to pin down early on. Then from the corporations, it's then going to come down onto the people. And the people themselves will be getting this social credit score. Now the businesses, the reason for the ESGs, now they're starting to say, well, we're going to do these we'll do bonds that are based on portfolios or hedge funds or whatever that's simply based on ESG high scoring companies. Like the same way that there's the opposite of that in Wall Street, there's like the sin fund, which is like all the casinos, all the arms makers, all the alcohol, Philip Morris, all that might be a good thing to invest in, right? Maybe not the best, like for how you feel about yourself, but if you want to make money, there's a fund where you can invest in that. The ESG component is going to really tap into people's desire to do what's right for the world, for society, to be socially responsible, but it's not going to be about any of that. It's just another scam that's cooked up by these maniacs on Wall Street and their buddies that run the large corporations. So, Monsanto is going to get a pass. They're not going to be subject to ESG scores. They'll get a waiver for this. Exxon, same thing. You just know Amazon. Oh, you guys fly all over the place. Your boxes, your carbon footprint must be enormous. Yeah, it must be enormous. Good thing we got a waiver.
Right.
So like all of it, like carbon taxes and all that stuff, these companies aren't going to pay for that. You're going to pay for it. And it'll take a while before it moves all the way down to a social credit system for people. But they're going to start the social credit system, at least here in the West, with the ESG scores and the corporations. Now, they've already started the social credit system in China. In Shenzhen, China, they've had that for a while. I've seen the same Black Mirror episode that you saw, and it's like, you get the feeling that the people writing over at Black Mirror, they're very good at their job. Let's just put it that way. And they might know people. They probably know some people at DARPA. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody over there is helping them with the writing of it. But that's basically the ESG component of it. It sounds good, like any good scam, right? It sounds fine on the outside because it's draped in this, we're just trying to make things better. But then when you drill down into it, what you find is you find a lot of gray areas and a lot of the wrong people in charge.
Yes, well put. My favorite sponsors and yours, PalomaVerdeCBD.com. They've got some new products that I will be telling you about. As always, I can tell you, Carlos and Vanessa, the owners of PalomaVerdeCBD.com, wonderful people. So when you buy from them, you're supporting a great couple that are like-minded, and it helps support this show that I know you love. Check out these new products. They've got the CBD massage oil. Let your mind wander on that one for a bit here. They've got the full spectrum unflavored CBD tinctures. Check this out, ladies. After a hard day at work, how does a CBD bath bomb sound to you? Well, they've got those now. They've got the CBD soft gels, of course, the CBD gummies, mint tinctures, the salve stick, and of course, the pet treats, the stuff that my French bulldogs, Lux and George, both use every morning. Now, you've heard me rave about the sports cream before. I'm going to read you something one of my friends and listeners wrote to me specifically about that. Last year, I gave my dad a bottle of the Paloma Verde sports cream as part of a present for his 86th birthday. He's very active, walking 3 to 4 miles a day, as well as working with a strength and conditioning coach. Still, his back often bothered him because, well, no prescriptions that he takes ever fixed it. Well, he found the Paloma Verde cream to be very effective in relieving the occasional discomfort. Last week, he slipped on some ice in his driveway and suffered from, thankfully, minor injuries, including his back. For 3 days, he was unable to sleep due to his back pain. He had run out of the Paloma Verde cream, so I gave him the link to the reorder. It arrived within a day or two, and he immediately began using it. He sent me this text the next morning after enjoying his best night's sleep in almost a week since the fall. Quote, "The cream application last night worked like a charm. I was pain-free in just about any position," unquote. In addition, my sister, who was staying with him, was so impressed by his results that she ordered some for her husband, who regularly experiences leg pain at night. My dad resumed much of his regular activity and attributes much of his recovery to the Paloma Verde sports cream for the pain relief and just how much it helped him get the much-needed rest at night. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a honest-to-God true statement. Someone wrote to me about this cream that I'm telling you, I always brag about how amazing it is. You will find it at palomaverdecbd.com, where you will get 25% off of your order when you use promo code BUCK at checkout. That's BUCK at checkout for 25% off of your order. Go support them and support this show. You will not be sorry. Let's get back to the show. There's so many places to go because, again, there's so many crazy things happening at this moment. A lot of people have said, including myself, it does appear that we're moving out of this COVID hell that we've been in. But I really fear to say, well, we're beyond that now. And I don't know that, again, that it's going to be a new strain. But I do know if that was a test run, a lot of people fell for it, and a lot of people are perfectly willing to sit at home and report you if you don't sit at home, et cetera, et cetera. We've all seen just citizens willing to be arms of the state for free. Gas is getting super expensive right now. I think it's a possibility, especially by the time this episode drops, that it's going to be worse. Depending on what happens in Russia and Biden and all of this mess that we're in. One thought I had is gas can become so expensive that that's just a new flavor of lockdown because a lot of people can't afford to go anywhere. And then you hear people say, well, climate change is probably the next big emergency, and that's where we're going to fall into, well, you have to have climate lockdowns and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Where do you see things going in the next couple of years in this kind of regard?
Well, it's funny because right when this kicked off, March 22nd or so. So we were maybe like 10 days or a week, 2 weeks out from when everything kicked off. I did a show with James Corbett, and he and I were speculating. It had just started. We didn't know what was going on, but they just started the 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And he said to me, he first of all, he apologized in advance. He said, I don't want to put this out into the universe to give these maniacs any ideas. But he says, I'm pretty sure they already have this. They've already game theoried this one. But he said, what if they lock everyone down and everyone's like, oh God, they're going to lock us down. And they go into their hole and they stay there for a while and they watch Netflix and they do all that stuff. And then at some point they say, you're free to go. You're free to get up and you're free to go. And everyone gets out and they go back and then they kind of forget about it for a little while. He said, and then a new emergency comes and they go, and the government says, it's that time again. It's Netflix time. Come on back. And you go, oh, yeah, I remember that. It was Netflix and chill. And I hung out and I worked from home and it wasn't that bad. He goes, and the second time around is way easier. And that time they get you in and they lock the door and they don't let you out. And I went, oh, God, James, like, I feel like you might have you might be onto something. So he described it as conditioning, human training. And that makes me nervous because like you said, like you rightly pointed out, a lot of people willing to go to work for the state for nothing. You just call the police on their neighbor who has too many cars in their driveway on Thanksgiving. And you know what that means? Everybody's going to die. And I said, well, you know how annoying that is. And you see how destructive and insane those people can be. Now, allow yourself to extrapolate out where those people would take things if they thought they were saving the planet. Like they already were doing that when they thought that they were saving some theoretical grandmother that they didn't know. But now the morons, the morons that couldn't figure it out, that enthusiastically said, I'll be the best informant you've ever had. These people who had nothing going on in their life prior to this were then deputized and brought into this and given a purpose, a special purpose, like Navin Johnson from The Jerk. I found my purpose. And they're out there and they're out there trying to save the world from COVID. And now that's gone. And I feel like they may be feeling a little deficient. But when the climate scenario comes back again, and we know it will. We know it'll come. Climate lockdowns, like you said, maybe the gas is the easy way into it. It'll just make it so that nobody's driving because nobody can afford to drive. Well, we're going to see a lot of the same tactics. We're going to see a lot of the same insanity. We're going to see the trust the science people coming out. It'll be a new scientist, but it'll be the same bot science. And so I guess you can look at this one of two ways. You can either say, they're going to get us the second time around because they're going to do all these things again and it's going to be a much bigger scam. Or if you want to be optimistic about it, you'll say, well, that's true. They are going to run all the same plays, but that's because they're stupid. That's because they're not very creative. That's because they're arrogant and they think that this will work. Let them run the same play again, because then it'll be easy for us to go, remember that? Remember all those lies that they told us about COVID, that you said we were grandma killers and we were all these things. And then it turned out that we were right and you were wrong and that the media was lying to you. Well, guess what? It's the same thing coming on again. Even down to the trust the science, even down to the 15 days to flatten the curve, whatever sort of story they roll out, and it'll have a lot of similarities. One way to look at that is that it'll be easy for us to discredit because it'll be kind of obvious that it's the same plan. So I don't know I don't know exactly how it will look in terms of this climate lockdown insanity scenario. I only know that they will do the same things that they always do, which is weaponize stupidity, get a lot of people very angry and then about something, and then demonize one group. Anti-vaxxers in 2020 or in 2021, it'll be climate deniers in 2023 and 2024 or whatever. And that same enragement that they whip the NPCs up into for COVID will be climate related, and we'll be quoting numbers that we have. We'll be exposing all of this, and we'll be saying, don't trust the media, don't trust these bot scientists, look at these facts, and they'll be calling us crazy again. So it'll be frustrating. I think it'll be frustrating in that sense, where there'll be part of us feeling like, like if you are unwilling or unable to figure this out, then maybe you don't deserve the information. So my patience level got lower and lower and lower and lower. And I hated that I was allowing that to happen. But I got to the point, maybe you felt the same way, which is, look, if you have questions about what we're experiencing with the COVID thing, and you have questions about the role of the pharmaceutical industry or maybe the media, and they're like honest questions, I'll answer your questions all day long. But if someone just wants to tell me I'm stupid or I'm anti-vax because I'm dumb or something, I don't know. I don't have time to argue with those people. I feel like I'm going to prioritize my time better the next time around, because I got into it. I fell into those dumb traps where I argued with people online about this stuff, and I realized this is pointless. They don't want to education on it. They just want to fight. And so with climate the second time around, you know, it'll be interesting. It may be that they press their luck and try to run the same play again, and it just is so obvious. Or maybe they have made a calculation that the average IQ in America is such that, man, we can run the same play again. You know, I went to USC, and in USC in the 60s, they had a football play called Student Body Right. That was when you handed the ball to O.J. Simpson, everybody ran to the right, and they kept running that play because nobody could ever defend it. And they won a national championship that year, and they ran the same play over and over again. So maybe the mentality of the World Economic Forum people and the predator class is, well, you know what? We're going to keep running the same play until they show us that they can actually stop it. And I don't know that we stopped it with COVID. We exposed it, but I can't say that we necessarily won. Felt kind of like a hollow victory if there was a victory. But I do believe we had an impact in it. But I don't think that we stopped a lot of the... I mean, there's still plenty of carnage. So the second time around, will they be arrogant and run it the same way? My guess is yeah, actually.
Yeah.
My guess is yeah. I think so.
Same. And part of that is I do think we have an elite that, if you want to compare them to, let's say, the elite in the 1910s or 20s, it's not even close, in my opinion, in IQ, how impressive of people they actually are. Not that everyone back then was a good person. Certainly leading up to FDR's stuff, we know that they weren't. But I'm not sure that these guys have as much brain power. I guess that's the nice way to put it. Yeah. So we shall see. You've done shows on propaganda, and I know you're well versed in understanding propaganda. And again, I thought the propaganda going through 2020, 2021, and so on was like stuff I've not seen since just maybe post 9/11 and then leading up to the war in Iraq and whatnot. But now, speaking of war, the propaganda coming out about what's going on with Russia and Ukraine may top the stuff I saw with COVID. Yeah. What are your thoughts on what we're seeing with this stuff? And then I don't even want to taint what you're going to say with any opinions of my own, so I'll just kind of let you take it. The propaganda you've seen with this Russia-Ukraine stuff.
Yeah, my first thought is that when they bring out the Ghost of Ukraine stories and the Snake Island and the hot Ukrainian women who are Miss Teen Ukraine, who's now got her machine gun. She's doing all this, but it turns out it's an airsoft gun. When they run all these stories over and over again, and they're not true, and they get exposed, or they're showing Zelensky and like, look at how brave he is. He's in his military gear. He's right up at the front. That's how you lead. We should learn from it. It's like, that's from 2021. So it's like, okay, the picture that they're painting of this war is using paints that are all no good. Like these images don't work. These are fakes. The stories are fake. The pictures are from a year or years ago. Footage from video games that's being sold. So I see that and I go, much like COVID. During COVID, I would say, this is not how you behave when you're in the middle of an actual pandemic. This is how you behave when you're trying to convince people that you're in the middle of a pandemic. So with the war, the Ukraine, I'm not trying to say that there isn't fighting going on, but what I'm trying to say is that this unbelievably junior varsity level media manipulation game that they're playing is so embarrassingly flawed, and that I'm insulted that they chose to use this low level of propaganda on us. I frankly demand a higher quality of propaganda from the mainstream media, because this is embarrassing. Like what they're doing is embarrassing, and they're trying to, get everyone. So when the media wants me to feel one way, I'm instantly suspicious, of course. And then social media, you see the pressures of that. Everyone like put Ukrainian flags in their bio and everything. It's like, oh, okay, all right. Well, why is everybody doing this? It's fine if some people want to do it, if that's how you feel, or you have ties there, fine, whatever. I don't have a dog in this fight necessarily, except that I am watching the media's role in it. It is very one-sided. And they want everybody to feel one particular way. And whenever I see that, I start to get suspicious because I feel like that's a setup. So I'm anti-war. I don't want wars happening anywhere. I don't care who's responsible. I just want them all to stop. But I fully recognize that the mainstream media has done things like this before. We've seen it on smaller levels with things like, oh, look at this fighting in Syria. And it's like, that's from a Kentucky gun range. And they're like, well, yeah, it is. But we wanted to show you what it might look like in Syria. And you're like, no, this isn't. So like the media has done this where they have, frankly, they have nobody to blame but themselves for this. If they want to sell this war the way they used to do it, which is through the news and through manipulation, they have to invest in improving their own reputations, because as it stands right now, I'm sorry, CNN can't tell me anything. I'm not interested in anything CNN. In fact, the minute I figure out what side CNN is on, by default, I'm on the other side, because I know that there's something going, or I'm at least not on their side. Let me just say that. I'm not on their side. I might be agnostic, but I'm definitely going to examine it. And the propaganda game with regard to this war has been phenomenal. I mean, it's been unreal. But it's been
literally, yes.
Yeah, unreal. Yeah, it's literally unreal. And I think that, I don't know if it's that they just brought in the JV team to run this op, or they don't care anymore, or they've role played this and they've said, look, the vast majority of Americans will believe just about anything we tell them, so we don't even have to work up a real good story. But, like Babies in the Incubator was some grade A level propaganda, and it worked well, and it changed it literally took a war that had no support and made it a priority. So when done well, propaganda can be extremely effective. When done poorly, it has the exact opposite effect. It shines a light on everything, and everyone goes, whoa, whoa, whoa. You're lying to me about the Ghost of Kiev. You're lying to me about Snake. You're lying to me about all these stories. If you're lying to me about this stuff that means nothing, why would I believe you about the important stuff? Why would I actually believe you about and then they do things like this that I've gotten better at recognizing these. I think the audience probably has too, because in some parts, some ways, it's just been so cartoonish, it's hard to not miss this. But when you hear the mainstream media say something like, sources close to the president's thinking said this, you're like, what does that even mean? Sources familiar with the president's thinking said that Putin is planning an attack? That's, first of all, it's just insert the CIA says whatever. Yes. But even if it wasn't the CIA, it'd be like, my cousin's friend says that they heard that Putin was. I mean, it's as relevant as what they say. So I've had to get better at paying attention to the details of language too, that the media uses. And that is something that I was a little bit slow at figuring out. But once people would tell me like, hey, listen for this term, or listen for this. And then you go, okay, fine. When I watch the news, I'm going to listen for that. And then you hear it, then you can't unhear it. Then you start to notice these things all over the place. So the first battle, I think, is winning the hearts and minds. And I don't know that I don't know if the media has been able to accomplish that. They used to be able to do it quite easily. And now it's requiring more and more effort. And the output that they're getting is like indifference from like kind of a weary public that's sort of like, Like, really? We've got our own border. We're going there because Ukraine is having a border problem with Russia? Oh,
Yeah.
you mean like the border problem we're having? And then Biden goes, I've got it all figured out. I'm going to take border patrol agents from the southern border and voluntarily, of course, as long as they're willing to work 24 hours a day for a month straight. We're going to take them and we're going to relocate them to the border of Poland and Ukraine so they can, you just go, I stop this insanity. Like, stop this planet. I want to get off. These are the suggestions and ideas that are being floated around as like problem solving. And I just go like, is this real? Is this I feel like I'm on drugs. Is this real?
Mm-hmm.
Is the president really suggesting that where we have 2 million people a year coming through our southern border, let's take all the people that are doing the best job that I guess that they can there and move them to somebody else's border? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. So I guess maybe in a weird way, we can hope that they continue to do things that are so absurd that even the most dumbed down person figures it out. But I mean, that's hardly a winning strategy.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I've seen voices like Sean Hannity, who just a year ago were discussing the dishonest and just horrible nature of the Ukrainian government and how Biden made money from them, and certainly his son made money from them, now propping them up like Zelensky's a hero, just like the whole thing with the Biden family and in Ukraine never happened. It's just like, do you think the audience forgot? Unfortunately, maybe a lot of them did, and now they've got the tie a yellow ribbon around the old oak tree syndrome or something like that.
Well, in Sean Hannity's case, if people are confused about how he feels about things, just look at the lapel pin he's wearing. It's the CIA's logo.
CIA. That's right.
So that I mean, used to be like, Operation Mockingbird's a secret. Don't tell anyone.
Yeah.
Sean Hannity's like, where do you want me to put the pin? Which side do you want me to put the pin on?
Bingo. That's right. In closing here, for the people that hear this and heard us talk about Cyber Polygon and it seems plausible, and they're thinking, all right, Charlie, all right, Buck, I believe that's a very good possibility that stuff could happen. How do I prep for this? What do I do? What would you say?
So, like any good problem that people have, be it an alcohol addiction or something else, the first step is recognizing that you have a problem. So recognizing that the World Economic Forum does exist, that they are planning something fairly massive with regard to a cyber attack. And then once you've come to that understanding, then you say, all right, well, what am I going to do to get myself in a better position to deal with this? Like we already talked about the money thing. I would definitely get yourself into a situation where you're not dependent on electronic forms of communication. Definitely get yourself food. And I say that fully knowing that it sounds alarmist. And I've already done my mea culpa to the preppers. I've apologized profusely for even just in my mind, sort of slightly making fun of them, like, oh, you preppers, you crazy preppers. Preppers are right. You should always be prepared. Don't freak your family out if you don't need to. Tell them it's for like in case of a natural disaster, fires, earthquake, tornado, whatever is in your geographic region. Silently and calmly start making preparations. That includes having food. That includes having cash, having some silver, having some gold, having some things that you can conduct business with. Getting yourself into a situation where you're not having to battle with some moron in the frozen food aisle over the last bag of peas. You know what I mean? You don't want to be in that scenario. We saw how bad things get on Black Friday when people are just trying to get a $14 VCR and they're knocking old ladies out. And you don't want to deal with that when it comes to hunger. You know what I mean? So like, let's all agree to be proactive instead of reactive. We're better off being 3 months early than 3 days late on this stuff. So as best as you can, without scaring everybody, start thinking like that and start making moves in advance. Like Vin said, take advantage of this downtime, right? This is the time we're going to get to a point where you're going to wish you could go back to this point you're at right now and do things differently. So start thinking about it differently now. Start thinking about, okay, I need these things. I need these items. You know how it is. I mean, people say, well, there's going to be a big storm. Like, oh, I've got extra batteries and I've got extra food and hot chocolate because I'm going to be snowed in. Okay, just take that thinking and extrapolate out. And, look, as far as internet, how to technically protect yourself from that, I'm literally the wrong guy to ask about how to build a Faraday cage and protect these things, if that would even matter. I don't know. But they talked about in this simulation how everything that's connected, the only way to solve it is to be unconnected, to be disconnected. Well, I think that's how they want us. But they might be right that is one of the ways to be prepared, is to be a little bit disconnected from this. So just start thinking a little bit old school and a little bit more, maybe think a little bit more like a paranoid person and act accordingly and start to make moves in advance. And if you do that, a couple things will happen. First of all, you'll be prepared. You'll be more prepared. But you'll start to feel like you're on the right track, and it will free you up to have okay, fine, I took care of the low-hanging fruit. Now what else am I going to do? Maybe I'm growing a garden. For people that have never grown a garden before, hey, it's going to be spring pretty soon. Maybe this is the year I decide I'm just going to build some of these little garden beds and I'm going to buy some seeds. I'm going to see if I can grow cucumbers. Hey, I grew cucumbers. What do you know? If I did that, then maybe I could grow something. So it's incremental. It starts you down this path of self-reliance. And that's great. That's a great thing. So I wish we wouldn't have to think about it because of all the bad things that could be coming our way. I wish we just naturally were thinking about these things. Maybe sometimes you need a disaster. And what we're getting right now is we're actually getting the benefit of the threat of a disaster without the actual disaster happening right this moment. So we can pretend like it's here and plan accordingly now, in the now. And when it does happen, and I think it will, unfortunately, and I'm not trying to put that out there, but I just know how these people operate, and they see these crises as a great opportunity to remake society in the way that they want it. And so to us, a huge crisis like this is terrible. To them, it's a great opportunity. So because of that, I sort of act as if I'm paranoid about what they're going to do, and I make moves accordingly. So, and then as far as once you're familiar and comfortable with all of this, I would say start to communicate with the people. Maybe it's geographically close to you, or at least close to you emotionally, that don't think you're insane for talking about this or thinking about these things. And you find a couple of those and you start to have the conversation with them, and you don't freak them out, but you make them aware of what you know. And you tell them, you say, as a friend to a friend, as somebody that I love, I'd hate for you to be in a bad spot too. You might want to start thinking about this. And that's how it spreads, And so we spread preparedness around instead of fear, though, I understand that there's a little bit of fear in there because getting prepared is kind of scary and all the things that come with it. And why am I getting prepared? Oh, because they're going to do this bad thing. That's scary, but don't let it paralyze you. Let it motivate you and get so that you're seeing things differently. So what's the worst that happens, right? You're prepared. You've got food.
You got new skills.
You got new skills. You got a new way of thinking. You're ready in case there is a natural event or something like that. But I don't think that there's any downside in being ready to this. And frankly, there's nothing but upside.
Well put. Once again, plug away anything you'd like to plug. Please do.
Oh, well, my podcast, Macroaggressions, is available in audio format wherever podcasts are served. And in video format, you can find it on David Icke's platform, Iconic. You can find it on Rockfin. You can find it on Odyssey. And it's on band.video now. The website is theoctopusofglobalcontrol.com. People can reach out to me there. I'm on Twitter. I'm back on Twitter again after getting kicked off for the Bill Gates thing. You can find me there at Macroaggressions, though I make no promises about my durability on on that platform because I do say some things, and it's only a matter of time. But yeah, and the books, I've got 3 books out. They're all available at Amazon in paperback, or if people are interested, they can connect with me directly through the website, and I can get them to you in digital format.
Awesome. Charlie Robinson, thanks so much for being here on Counterflow. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Buck. I appreciate it.
All right. I hope you guys learned some stuff from that interview. Thanks once again to Charlie Robinson. He's a super cool guy on and off the air, I must say. I enjoyed that. You can find my stuff. You pretty much know this, but there's a website, counterflowpodcast.com. It's got a lot of information. It's got t-shirts. We still have a few t-shirts left that you can purchase from that website. If you'd like to support the show, I'm more than happy to accept your loving donations. It can be as little as $1 or as much as you like, really. And that's over at patreon.com/counterflow. Of course, we've got this video that you just heard. This podcast is in video form up on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube page. Of course, just search Counterflow with Buck Johnson. You will find it. And until next week, you guys have an awesome week. See ya.
You get split in fucking half, till I call on the hologram graph. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Like the sound of the Counterflow podcast? Our audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.